Hi everybody. So this is the new International Atlas of the World Remapped, new 1936 edition with supplement. I can't imagine that's visible on camera, but there it is. So this is 13 years older than the atlas we looked at in another video. I just got this book last week, so I thought we could look at it. I mentioned New Zealand specifically in the title to this video because it was brought to my attention that in the video looking at the 1949 atlas, New Zealand was not given due attention. I apologize for that. It was not purposeful. In retrospect, I think I was looking with increasing horror at the length of that video and felt subconsciously rushed and didn't pay attention or enough attention to certain things that I should have done. But I will rectify that in this video. Coincidentally, this particular book makes that easy, and you'll see why I say that. It is a very unusual atlas, and why I describe it that way will be revealed. So let's start and take a look. Well, the Chronicle of Conquest, very few atlases open like that, but there you have it. This is part of the supplements. One of the interesting elements of atlases especially is that they are time capsules from the period in which they are published, and this one is no exception. Among the interesting parts of this page is this section here, last minute flashes in new maps of Europe, Tsar return to Germany, Japanese Empire, showing in detail puppet state of Manchukuo, Africa as it is after the Franco-Italo Treaty of January 8th, 1935, proposed air routes, shortwave, distances port to port. 1936 was the 1930s, of course, was, shall we say, a portentous time. Hitler had become Chancellor of Germany in 1933 and was simultaneously consolidating his hold in Germany, but also beginning to expand. Franklin Roosevelt in the United States was running for his second term of the presidency, which he would win, and the world was suffering from the Great Depression. Italy was in its 14th year under the governance of the dictator Benito Mussolini, and there was a war in Asia as Japan intended to expand its realm of control in China and later Southeast Asia and throughout the Pacific. 1936, when this book was published, was also the year in which the Spanish Civil War began, which is not mentioned here, surely because the book was not printed in time to mention that. That war started in July 1936, and presumably this was published before then. So these notes reflect the burgeoning chaos that was engulfing the 1930s, especially the late 1930s. World War II began in 1939, so this atlas is a snapshot of the world between the wars, World War I and World War II, and has some interest and value for that reason, if nothing else. Specifically, and I don't want to drone on too long, but just for those who aren't familiar, these particular references, the Saar returned to Europe. The Saar is a coal region of Germany near Luxembourg and France, which was taken from Germany and given to the French for a period of 15 years after World War I as compensation, or I should say reparation, for Germany's role in World War I, which Germany was compelled to accept full responsibility for as part of the Treaty of Versailles. It wasn't, of course, solely responsible, but that's part of why the treaty was unfair. But anyway, in 1935, there was a plebiscite, that is a referendum, in which the people of the Saar voted to return to Germany, and they did. And so that's what that is noting, that it is no longer under French control, but back as part of Germany. Obviously, Hitler was keen to resume control of the Saar for the natural resources. The Japanese Empire began expanding in 1931 by attacking Manchuria, which is in, of course, East Asia, and which is part of China. I don't mean East Asia is part of China, I mean Manchuria is part of China. And so the Japanese invaded, and about a year later they took control of Manchuria and renamed it Manchukuo, Manchuria, again very rich in natural resources, which is why the Japanese wanted it. Japan itself, not very rich in natural resources, and so is dependent on outside areas for its war machine. Some people will take the position that World War I really started in 1931 with Japan's attack on Manchuria rather than 1939 with the German invasion of Poland. I think the position is supportable, but there we have it. And then simultaneously with all of this, Italy under Mussolini was attempting to reconstitute the Roman Empire. That's not hyperbole. He really wanted to do that. And so he began attacking Ethiopia in Africa and other African territories, which he thought would add to Italy's greatness. However, those territories were often under French control. And so that treaty put things, gave a little bit of peace for a few years. But Africa was the first bullseye for Mussolini as far as territorial expansion. So these things, I suppose, are self-explanatory. I do like the proposed air routes. Flying was only, powered flight was 32 years old by this point, but had been enhanced significantly as a result of the First World War. If you take a look at airplanes in 1914 and compare them to planes in 1918, you will agree, I think, that war, despite, or I should say, not despite, but it is tragic, but is certainly an innovator, a serious engine of innovation for technology. So, okay, I might have dwelt on that too much, but, this is why these kind of books are interesting and important to look at, because the publisher thought these things were important enough to merit, and they give a flavor of the time in which it was published. It gives a flavor of what the world was like. Well, this book has pages and pages of encyclopedic narrative material on, well, as you can see, the Viking adventures. This is part of the conquest of the world from the barbarians, etc., etc. But we're going to skip through that because this is, we want to look at the maps. But anyway, it just gives you some idea that pages and pages of pretty interesting stuff, but not what we're going to look at right now. Now let me see if I can try to tighten this up. There, that's maximum. Okay. Well, this is the promised relief map of the cradle of civilization. Certainly no satellite imagery in 1936, so this is a projection, supposed bird's eye view of the Fertile Crescent and the area around it. But we'll move on here. So here is Europe, and the writing in this atlas is extremely small. I'm under no illusions that the place names are absolutely invisible on camera, and the truth is it's 5 inches from my face and I can barely read these place names, but we'll do the best we can. A few interesting things I will point out. You see here Germany. This is, of course, a portrait of Europe prior to World War II, but after World War I. So what's the difference? Well, one difference is that here's Yugoslavia, which you'll see later is spelled with a J here, which is fine. It's just not the custom ever since. But anyway, Yugoslavia, of course, formed after World War I, constituting what we now have as Croatia, Bosnia-Herzegovina. I pronounced that weird, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Slovenia, Macedonia, Serbia, and Kosovo, and Montenegro. They're all jammed together as Yugoslavia. It should be said that it's often presented, in American schools at least, maybe elsewhere, that after World War I, all these countries were sort of forcibly jammed together, and a map was created by a bunch of dopey people who didn't know what they were doing. Well, in fact, that's not correct. I mean, Pan-Slavism, the idea that Slavic people should be united, was very strong prior to World War I, and indeed was one of the precipitating causes of World War I. After all, that's what Serbia was all about, trying to unite Slavic people. So Yugoslavia, although it had a tortured history in the 20th century, was kind of a realization of the Pan-Slavic dream. The people who drafted the Treaty of Versailles did not force people to be together. This is the way that many of these people wanted to be, is united. Of course, there was a heavily Muslim population in Bosnia and throughout this portion because of the conquest of the Ottoman Empire centuries before. And so it's not to say that everybody was real happy to be together, but it is a misrepresentation to say that the Treaty of Versailles planners jammed people together who didn't want to be. The same thing here, Czechoslovakia created after World War One. Then, of course, again, currently we have the independent Czech Republic and Slovakia. And we have here East Prussia, which certainly is no longer there. Königsberg, actually you won't see it there because it's tiny, but Königsberg is now Kaliningrad, which is a little portion of Russia that is not contiguous with the rest of Russia. That's a result of World War II. The Ottoman Empire was no more after 1921, so we have the modern state of Turkey, the modern secular state of Turkey represented here, a result of the work of Kemal Ataturk, who had served in World War One, and was extremely annoyed at the way the British and the French treated him and the Turkish people, and so decided to go his own way and Turkey's own way rather than being lackeys of Western Europe. And of course we have the USSR here. This is an atlas that renders names as they are natively pronounced. So we have Moskva here, Napoli, Roma. I prefer when atlases do that rather than just anglicize everything. Okay, so taking a look at Africa, well, as with the 1949 map, Africa is perhaps the most strikingly changed since the book was published. You will see here that Africa is controlled by much of Europe, or I should say much of Africa is controlled by Europe. This is mainly French, this green area. Sort of the pink areas are British. This would be Italian, Ethiopia. As I just mentioned, the Italian conquests of Ethiopia. Madagascar here is green, not because it's Italian, just because it's a different color out there. The Belgian Congo. So this will all change in the 1960s. And as I may have mentioned in the other video, but it's worth reiterating that you'll see here is Liberia. Liberia is the only country in Africa which was never colonized by any outside power. Liberia was founded by former slaves who left the United States and returned to Africa. The capital is Monrovia, named after U.S. President James Monroe, who was president at the time that Liberia was settled. And they're very proud, I have to tell you, of the fact that they have never been colonized. Of course, this area now, Libya, of course, is still Libya, Algeria, clearly now independent, Morocco, and this is Western Sahara, which is kind of controlled by Morocco. But then these areas constitute today Mali, Mauritania, well, it obviously says Mauritania, but Mali would be here, Niger would be about here, Chad is mentioned here, Upper Volta is now a Burkina Faso, or Faso, I should say. This is the Gold Coast, which is now Ghana. Ivory Coast, which is normally rendered Côte d'Ivoire. It's, as you can see, it's in the French area, so they're francophone. Dahomey would be now Benin and Togo, or Togo. Cameroon is noted here, now independent, of course. Below it would be Gabon, and then the Congo is here, and then this, of course, was the Congo, as you can see, but then it was Zaire for some time after independence, and is now the Congo again. Democratic Republic of the Congo is what it is called, whereas this is the Congo period. Down here, where it says Southwest Africa, that is now Namibia. And then over here, where it says Portuguese East Africa, that is now Mozambique. Well, it actually says in there Mozambique. And then, of course, we have the areas of Southern Africa, which now constitute South Africa, Northern and Southern Rhodesia. Northern Rhodesia became Zambia, and Southern Rhodesia became Zimbabwe. One of the worst governed countries in the world, and I'm not in any way trying to be critical of things I don't know what I'm talking about, but Robert Mugabe, who has been the president of Zimbabwe since 1980, has squandered every single resource of Zimbabwe and driven his country into the ground. Obviously, there are other poorly governed countries. The United States is not perfect in any way. But Zimbabwe is a tragedy that is often underreported, and one of the worst offenders of human rights, press freedom, economic stability. It is a terrible situation. That will be my only editorial comment. Okay, and then Botswana would be about here. Italian Somaliland, of course, is Somalia, and then British Somaliland is now Eritrea. Or, excuse me, no, it's not. That's Eritrea right there. This is all Somalia now. Although, as some of you may know, there's an area in northern Somalia today which calls itself Somaliland, which is sort of declares its independence, but in fact not recognized as being independent, but it is in fact very peaceful, productive, much different from the rest of Somalia in terms of its turbulent existence. And then Tanganyika and Zanzibar merged to form Tanzania in the early 1960s. You'll see Uganda is here. So it is pretty obvious that, I should just point out, we have Portuguese Guinea, it says here. It's abbreviated, but that is now Guinea-Bissau. Gambia is here. Senegal would be, well, that's Guinea. French Guinea is just Guinea, and then Portuguese Guinea is Guinea-Bissau, and then Senegal is up here. But as I was saying, Africa has certainly changed the most since this book was published, and since in the last 60 years, or at least almost 60 years. Well, as I mentioned, New Zealand, from this, regarding the issue of this being a very unusual book, I have no idea why New Zealand comes up so quickly in this atlas. I really don't. We go from Europe to Africa to Japan, which we'll get to, and then here we have New Zealand, and then after New Zealand, I don't know, you'll see, but my guess is that this particular portion of the atlas is the supplementary section showing the developments that it talked about in the front, even though it is not in any way noted as a supplemental section. And I don't pretend to know things that I really don't, and maybe New Zealand is so prominently and early displayed in this atlas because there was a development in New Zealand in the early 1930s or the mid 1930s that I just don't know about. And so therefore this is reflecting those developments. Of course, it's not listed in the front what those developments are. I mean, this is only titled, as you can see, New Zealand Political Map with State Outlines. So someone out there, you may know why New Zealand is so prominently displayed so early in this book. In this, I just don't know it. But I'm glad, because I did not pay the due attention I should have in the first video, well, the video on the 1949 atlas, and so to compensate for that, this book helps by having New Zealand come early in this review. Coincidentally, but there it is. So we'll just take a look here. New Zealand is divided, as you can see, at the North Island and the South Island. It's about 1,400 miles east of Australia. I have been to New Zealand twice, in 1999 and 2000, and I can report that the people of New Zealand are among the friendliest on the planet, and that the Auckland airport is, I think, the nicest I've seen. I had met an elderly couple who lived on the North Island, and they told me about the advantages and charms of North Island versus South Island. And then I met an elderly couple from South Island who told me the benefits and advantages of South Island compared to North Island. However, they are both very nice. New Zealand, the name, by the way, for those of you who are not aware, New Zealand is, the name derives from Zeeland, which is a province in the Western Netherlands, which we'll look at, but New Zealand was discovered by the Europeans in 1642, as I recall, by a guy named, an explorer named Abel Tasman, 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 as in Tasmania, the island south of Melbourne in Australia. And so, as was the custom, you name the place you discovered after where you came from. And so, New Zealand, of course, there were already people living here. The Maori people, Maori is the name of the, I hope I spelled that right, Maori. I believe that's correct. The Maori are the indigenous people there. When I first came off into the airport, the first time I was there in Auckland, and went into a kind of a news agency, the person behind the desk, the counter, was a Maori man whose face was painted like the New Zealand flag. And I thought, well, this is a patriotic people, and one that wants you to know it, and I'm certainly happy to see that. The other thing I'll just point out here is I was interested to see how many of the place names have clearly Maori origins, meaning they're not anglicized place names. Again, I would have to take an electron microscope to show you these names on here, but there's quite a few of them, which, to be honest with you, I will not embarrass myself by trying to pronounce. I do have some pride. Obviously, Wellington and Hawke's Bay and Nelson and Marlborough are not Aboriginal names or Maori names, but many of the place names are. I wish Waikari, okay, Waipara, the Wairaw Valley. Now, see, I was in this area here. Kaikoura, I believe I was there. It doesn't matter. The point is that I think it's nice. I personally think it's nice that when a place retains a lot of the original names, or at least the original language, because I think it acknowledges the fact that there were people living here and are people living there, and that it is not simply a culture to be ignored and forgotten about. And I say that, of course, thinking about in the United States how native peoples have been marginalized throughout the centuries, and that we still have some place names and indeed state names that have Native American origins, but you would not likely see the kind of integration of Native Americans in American culture that I witnessed in New Zealand with Maori people being integrated into the culture. I like New Zealand. Everyone I know who's been to New Zealand likes New Zealand. Oh, and maybe some of you have seen Flight of the Conchords, which was on HBO perhaps about 10 years ago, in which they are excellent ambassadors. It's a comedy show for those of you who don't know, but those two guys on there, excellent ambassadors to the world from New Zealand. I'm just noticing here Poverty Bay. Probably a story behind that name. So here, let's see if I can figure this out. All right. Well, here we have the Japanese Empire showing Japan, Chosun, Manchukuo, and northern Siberia. As noted, Japan began expanding its empire, or I should perhaps say creating its empire, in 1931, and it quickly occupied and took control of Manchuria, part of China, which is here now renamed Manchukuo. It's referred to as a puppet state because Japan did not annex it, did not incorporate it into Japan, for example, but simply stuck a native person in charge, but who took orders from Tokyo, hence the puppet part. Japan also took over the southern portion of Sakhalin Island, which, as you can see, was part of the USSR. However, that was not a result of the 1930s conflicts. That was a result of the Russo-Japanese War of 1905, where Russia was smashed by the Japanese. At the Battle of Sushido, which the Japanese Navy destroyed the Russian Navy that had come all the way from Western Russia. But the Japanese were very serious about modernizing and demonstrated that they had in that war. Well, the other main part here is that this is Korea, called here Chosen, which was completely occupied by the Japanese, and as some of you may know, suffered in the extreme under Japanese occupation. I believe it was only just recently that Japan acknowledged some of its atrocities, especially to Korean women who were used as slaves. I will not get into the details because I don't think it's appropriate for what we're doing here, but the point is that Korean women were treated very poorly, as was the rest of Korea too, but I think especially the women. So this is a portrait of the Japanese Empire in 1935-36, which within 6 years would expand throughout the Pacific. This is what can I say? I mean, it's biblical. We have Palestine in the New Testament, the kingdoms of Judah and Israel, and the Apostle Paul's missionary journeys. This sort of thing is not too uncommon in these sorts of things, these sorts of books, because Judeo-Christian values pervaded a lot of even general publications. And to the extent that this is a reference book and people would want to reference this sort of thing, then it makes sense, but not particularly something that you would see today. So after like 54 pages of other material, we get to the title page, which you can see here. A very strange book. But I'm going to... and then there's more encyclopedic material telling you all about the world. But there's just a few things I'll point out. These envelopes are my bookmarks. The first thing is, this is the Sphinx, and I was interested in this picture, and the caption says, "The Great Sphinx of Giza, since the recent clearing away of the sand which chokes the base of this monument." The significance is, and I had forgotten, that it was only in the 20th century that these full scale, or indeed the full body of the Sphinx was revealed. Since ancient times, sand dunes, not dunes, but sort of point is that sand had covered over the centuries the entirety of the Sphinx except for the neck. And I think I've seen pictures of that before it was cleared away, but even now you can see that it is not completely cleared away. This is a paw here. That's a paw still covered by sand. But when we look at the Sphinx today in all of its glory, it is on full display. It is not covered by sand at all. But for a lot of the past several thousand years, it was covered by sand and couldn't really be visible, which is really remarkable, I think. And then here, this weird picture, which looks like a flea, has the caption "Midsummer on Mars," and it is in fact a drawing. And this caption goes on to explain that it's a drawing made in 1909, the first day of the summer solstice on Mars, a drawing based on an observation through a telescope. I mean, this is completely uninformative from a 21st century standpoint. I mean, obviously it's a picture of Mars. Well, it's not even obvious, but this is the full circle of Mars with drawings, etc., etc. And I'm in no way thinking that it is quaint or trying to condescend to the past about their accomplishments, but I'm simply noting that compared to today, when we have vehicles on Mars that have been there for 12 years. In the case of Opportunity, I think, is the one that is still operating. And then the Mars lander, whose name I cannot remember, that was just put there on 2012, I think. To think that this was the cutting edge of science, it just shows you how much has changed. And again, it was cutting edge science, but the point is that it goes to show how far we've advanced in some 70 or 80 years. I think when we look at science and technology give a better measure of progress than I think human events do, because in human events, it's hard to see sometimes where the progress is. But in pictures of Mars, it is evident. All right, so we have about 20 million more pages of information about American states. It's crazy. It's not crazy, but it's just more than we would get out of an atlas now. But I'll just show quickly here. Well, quickly, so to speak. Here we have possessions of the United States, in which we see Alaska and Hawaii and the Philippines, other Pacific islands of the United States. Hawaii and Alaska became states in 1959 for Hawaii and 1960 for Alaska. Actually, I'm sorry, that's not correct. Hawaii was 1959. I'm sorry, I keep saying this wrong. Hawaii was 1960 and Alaska 1959. And then the Philippines were freed from American control in 1946, although still maintains a heavy military presence there, as it does elsewhere, of course. And then we see Guam, American Samoa, Wake Island, Puerto Rico, spelled unconventionally here. That has changed. Virgin Islands, the Canal Zone. Well, the United States still controls the Virgin Island and Puerto Rico and Guam and American Samoa and the Wake Islands. And those are all a result of the 1898 Spanish-American War, in which the United States committed to liberating these places from the Spanish Empire, only to take control of them itself. However, the Canal Zone refers to the Panama Canal, which opened in 1914. Oh, there it says, opened in 1914. Great. And so the United States controlled that area, but President Jimmy Carter in 1970, 77, 78, in the late 70s, returned it to Panama. And then here we have the British Empire listing the possessions of Britain, and we have pages and pages now. To be fair, this includes Canada, which is not a possession now. Then we have the Irish Free State, which really, I'm not sure should be listed here if it's free. The settlement there was after the Easter Rising of 1916. Australia, more Australia. Here we have the Dominion of New Zealand, giant eucalyptus tree in Tasmania, again, Abel Tasman. Islands ruled by New Zealand, Union of South Africa. I mean, it is significant. Sorry to be moving the book around so much, but I can't fit it all in here. But or maybe I can. Let me look. Yeah, I should probably just leave it still. And here we're looking at all the South African territories. British East Africa, India. I think that even if one sort of intellectually knows or realizes the extent of the British Empire in the first half of the 20th century, looking at these pages, these many pages, I think is still striking, or at least it's striking to me. It's a forceful reminder of the extent of the British Empire. Hence, the sun never sets on the British Empire. Of course, all that would go away after the Second World War. And I may have said this in the other video, but in my opinion, I think that the United Kingdom rather successfully navigated the transition from empire to, well, non-empire to post-empire. Here we have now the French Empire, not as long, not as many pages as the British Empire, but still pretty extensive. French Pacific Islands, French Asia, Madagascar, Equatorial Africa. I mean, you saw the African map. And then, you know, goes on to other European countries. Pages and pages. And so we're not going to go through every single one of these, nor will we linger on the maps of the individual states. So I'm going to skip. Here we have the United States in 1936, 1935 for all intents and purposes. The reason I pause on this map is because, really because it is interesting to see the Philippines, Guam, Samoa, Wake Island, Puerto Rico, and indeed the Canal Zone, all included in this map. That is not the convention these days. Of course, some of these are no longer American possessions, but it is a reminder that not only was the United States an empire, but it was a pretty extensive one. And cartographers wanted to present the expansiveness all in one shot. I mean, strictly speaking, this is not, Puerto Rico is not the United States. Samoa is not the United States. They could have had a different map that said the possessions of the United States, but in fact, these are all the United States as far as the cartographers went, or as far as they wanted to present. And I think that shows a certain, you know, it's a political attitude. It shows a certain viewpoint. So we have here, well, like an idiot, this is showing, this is a separate map with more detail on American possessions, which again, they could have just had this map rather than putting them there. I don't mean to make too big of a deal of it, but anyway. And here we have Mexico. Here we have a map of the world, which is not very detailed at all. I will just point out that we have here the Chinese Republic, because at the time China was essentially, well, there was a civil war for one thing between the Chinese communists under Mao Zedong and the Chinese Republicans under Chiang Kai-shek. But the United States did not want to recognize the communists, or perhaps give too much credence to them, and neither did the cartographers, and so it is there as the Chinese Republic rather than just China. But this is not a very detailed map. Now here we have Canada. There have been some changes. For example, Labrador is here, Newfoundland is here, but that is now one province called Labrador and Newfoundland. Or is it Labrador, Newfoundland? I don't want to make a mistake, but I can't remember whether there's an and there or not. But again, the weird thing about this particular atlas is this is not a very good map. It's not very detailed. Normally when you see a broad map like this, there's more detail to it, but there isn't. But we do have here more detail on the provinces of Canada. I have not been to Western Canada, but I have been to Quebec and Ontario, and I have to say that the Canadians are also an extremely friendly group of people. Why shouldn't they be? There in Canada. Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, and here's all of North America. You'll see the Dominion of Canada. I don't know when, I have no idea when Canada expressed a certain level or declared a certain level of independence so that it stopped being referred to as the Dominion of Canada. That is a gap in my knowledge, but it had to be around this time, I would think. Not around the 1930s, but I would think sometime after World War II. But there it is, the Dominion of Canada. Well, we have here South America, again with microscopic place names. Not too much change here, although again we have here these three countries which have definitely changed. This is referred to as, well, this is called, you see here, Guyana, but British Guiana is now Guyana. Dutch Guiana is now Suriname, and it says in parentheses Suriname. But French Guiana is still French Guiana. This particular map will be significant shortly as we proceed, but I will also just point out that you see here, excuse me, no you don't, here it says comparative area Pennsylvania, and it has a little outline map of Pennsylvania. Now that is pretty interesting to me, and very convenient and coincidental, because in fact I live in Pennsylvania, so it was nice that these cartographers decided to use Pennsylvania as an in-plate reference for size. I appreciate that. So this book not only uses Pennsylvania as a reference for size, but also has New Zealand as one of the first maps so that I could correct my earlier oversight. So it's a very strange book, with coincidences at least. Now, again, from the Files of Strange, there has already been a European map in this book. This is another map of Europe. My guess is that that is because the first map that we looked at was an updated map. And I say that because you will see that this, well, that's actually Luxembourg, but there's a purple kind of shaded area right here, which would be the Saar Valley and also the Ruhr, excuse me, the rural valley of Germany, which was under the occupation of the French, and until the 1935, it was. Excuse me, I'm losing my mind. I got distracted. Okay, so this shaded area includes the Saar Valley, which was returned in 1935 to Germany, but also the Ruhr Valley, R-U-R-H. No. What am I trying to say? The Ruhr Valley. R-U-R-H? I sound like an idiot. Doesn't matter. You know what I mean. R-U-R-H. That is the area of Germany which is also rich with natural resources, which was occupied by the French after World War I. Maybe I've never said it out loud. Maybe I can't pronounce it properly because I've never ever said it out loud in my life. The Ruhr Valley? I don't know. Just ignore that. But anyway, it's shaded in there because at this point it is not part of Germany. But in the earlier map, they're reflecting that change. Okay, so that is my explanation for why there are two European maps in here, although really your guess is as good as mine. Okay. Right, so you will see here that we have Asia. Oh, I'm sorry, there's one thing I wanted to point out. No, there isn't. It's not in this map. Sorry. Okay, so here we have Asia, and among the notable features, here we have the Empire of Japan, so noted as Empire of Japan. Korea is, again, Shozan. We have Manchukuo here. I'm sorry, that's not correct. I'm wrong. That's Manchuria up there, which is not referred to as Manchukuo. This colored area here, this is the Shandong Peninsula right here. And I'm trying to think why this is a different color. I imagine that this is reflecting the territorial gains of Japan. That must be the case because the war started in 1931. This is 1936. Although why wouldn't it have Manchukuo? The other explanation is that this is somehow reflecting I'm looking for an explanation, but I don't see one. The other thing, this is reflecting a sphere of influence by whom? I don't think it would be reflecting any division between the communists and Republicans in China. I honestly I do not know why this area is shaded differently. I don't know. If someone else has a theory, I'd be happy to hear it. But my explanations are that it's either reflecting territorial conquests in China since 1931 by the Japanese, in which case I don't know why Manchukuo is not shaded here, unless Manchukuo was only proclaimed in about 1935. That could be the case. But then why wouldn't it be shaded? I don't know of any European country that has occupied that area. I mean, obviously Hong Kong is down here, and Macau, but I don't know anybody else that was occupying the Shandong Peninsula area except for the Japanese in the 1930s. That's what I'm sticking to. But with the caveat that I am not 100% sure, but I will find out. Not before this video ends, though. Okay, and then we have French Indochina here. Oh, I will. Okay, I thought I muted that. In fact, I will mute this right now. Sorry about that. Idiot. Okay. French Indochina is here. Siam. Now, of course, Thailand. One thing I mentioned, or that I made a oversight or stupid mistake, is in the 1949 Atlas video, I mentioned that this is Ceylon, and that it is no longer called Ceylon, but I forgot to mention that what its modern name is, which is Sri Lanka. Well, here we see India, the big expanse of India, now, of course, partitioned so that we have, of course, India, but then over here is Pakistan, and then over here is Bangladesh. Those are a result of the partition of India in 1947, part of the British leaving India, a very violent and destructive upheaval. The partition happening to separate predominantly Muslim Pakistan and Bangladesh from a predominantly Hindu India, separating the areas of Punjab, which is right here, and Bengal, which is here, or actually I guess about here, and this is Burma, which is now Myanmar, recently reintegrated into the world after many, many years of military rule and ostracism. Tibet is here. This is before China reasserted its control of Tibet, which would happen after the Chinese Communist Party took over in 1949. And you will also see that Central Asia is so marked here, but there might be some, I don't even see the modern names in here, but this would be Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan, which is here written as Turkestan. And then over here we would have Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan would be the other one. Tajikistan would be about here, and Kyrgyzstan would be about there. Iran is in parentheses here, but this is labeled as Persia. And then here we have Saudi Arabia, which is just named here as Arabia. This is all called Oman, so we do not have Yemen there, or Djibouti. Actually, I'm sorry, that would be Qatar, or Qatar, as some people say, but I understand the native pronunciation is Qatar. Djibouti is down there. So that's certainly different as well. Oh, and then Malaysia is listed here as the Malay Peninsula. I don't think we have to spend more time on Africa. We sort of covered that, although I would just point out that reinforcing the notion that the other map was the supplemental part. It certainly has to be. This is here. Ethiopia is listed here as Abyssinia, which it was listed as Italian Ethiopia in the other one. You'll see here Libya is noted as Italiana, which, again, I don't know. I guess, again, the first map reflected this Italo-Franco Treaty of 1935, but there were conquests made in Africa by the Italians in the earlier 1930s, reflected here. This is a more detailed map than the one at front, but I don't think we have to go over that again. Here we have Oceania, there's New Zealand, and here we have Australia. Oh crap, let me try that again. Okay. Normally the territorial waters are not as prominently listed there, but hey, neat to see. Of course, here's the China Sea, the South China Sea, I should say. China is now, as some of you will know, trying to reassert control of that. Keep in mind Australia here for a minute. This video, once again, is getting overly long because I do not shut up. So I'm going to intentionally go a bit faster. But we see here England. I have to say that one of the nice things about this particular map is that the counties are prominently presented. I'd like to see them separated like this with their name, just because it's easier to read. Some of you may have seen that a few years ago there was a genetic map produced of Great Britain, and one of the interesting results of it was that the genes in Cornwall and Devon have a difference, or let me try this another way, that according to the genetic map, the boundary, Cornwall and Devon have different genetic signatures, and the boundary between them corresponds precisely to the current boundary between those two counties. It's extremely striking. I recommend looking at that. Okay, and here we have Scotland. One of the things that's always interesting about Scotland is that it is not only Celtic, obviously, and not only British, of course, but there was a heavy Norwegian presence in Scotland, especially northern Scotland, the Orkney Islands, and the Hebrides. That also was reflected in the genetic mapping. But if you go to the Orkney Islands, you will see that there are more people there with blonde hair and who look Nordic than in the rest of the British Isles. It's pretty striking. Also in the Orkneys is located Skara Brae, which is a Neolithic settlement about, gosh, what is it? I think it's about 4,000 years old, maybe a little older. And what they've discovered, they meaning archaeologists, historians, is that the ancient Orcadians influenced everyone to the south, meaning it was not the people of the rest of the British Isles having their influence go northward, but in fact it was the people of the north having their influence go southward, which you would not expect, but there it is. Well, you wouldn't expect it because it's such a small territory versus the larger territory below it. Well, here we have Ireland, which the division between Northern Ireland and Ireland, the Irish Republic, not prominently displayed here, but hardly can be ignored. Again, I like this map because the counties are prominently displayed. They're easy to read. Dublin, founded by Vikings. Other places in Ireland too, but again, Ireland is interesting because it has not only Celtic, not only British, but also a Norse presence as well. Right, so here's the deal. This book then gives you maps of every other European country, which we will quickly look at. Well, here's the Netherlands and Belgium too. I will just point out, for the sake of a bookend, so to speak, that here we have Zealand. Hence, we get New Zealand and Zealand. The word Z, Z-E-E, is the Dutch word for sea, as in the sea. So we have Zealand, land of the sea, New Zealand, new land of the sea. But anyway, that's where New Zealand comes from. Oh, well, and here, the Zuiderzee. I guess it's Zee. Again, my Germanic pronunciations are not too sharp today. But there you can see it. Friesland is up here. One thing I like about Germanic lands, and I call this Germanic simply from a linguistic standpoint, not a cultural standpoint. But Friesland, the name derives from the Frisians, who still exist, of course. There are still Frisians, but the early medieval Frisians were among the fiercest of the Germanic tribes in the early Middle Ages, and killed many missionaries, and were among the last to be converted to Christianity. Very, very fierce. Modern Frisians, I understand, are much more friendly. That also, by the way, I should say, is the area in which I think it seems clear is where the English language developed or originated. The closest modern language to English is Frisian, which is very interesting to see. Another interesting, at least to me, side note is that in the Roman Empire era, this sort of region was called Batavia, and in the late Roman Empire, one of the strongest and most reliable and fiercest fighting of the Roman troops were the Batavi, which were people drawn from Batavia. But again, I think it's fair to say that the Netherlands and Belgium are not particularly warlike now. Right, so, oh crap, hit my microphone. Here we have Spain and Portugal. I will just repeat that Spain, their civil war began in 1936, so this is a country that would be riven by war for the next 3 years. Here is Germany, and I don't see here Oh, well, see, there's the Saar, which is not in any way, there's nothing there that says it's occupied by the French, but it was. And also the Ruhr Valley. I gotta work on my pronunciation of that, but that's here in the Rhineland. But no indication on these maps that it was anything other than controlled by Germany. But we'll have to move along because I am aware that this video is incredibly long. Okay, Italy, Czechoslovakia, showing the different regions. So we have Bohemia here, Moravia here, and then there's Slovakia itself. This also shows the different sort of regional names of Austria, so that Carinthia is here, Styria is here. You don't often see that, which is nice to see because people in those regions are they're aware of their regional identity. And I don't want to say proud, but although some of them are. But the point is that those regional identities are more important to people there than perhaps modern atlases suggest. Here we have Yugoslavia, Albania, and Romania. I think we've discussed them sufficiently. I will just point out that you will see Yugoslavia spelled with a J there, but then on this map of Greece, it's spelled with a Y here. What does that mean? It means it's a typo, but there we see the change of the rendition of that name right in front of us. Greece. Again, I'm trying to withhold incessantly talking. Here we have European Russia. The Ukraine is here, although that was part of the USSR at the time. I mean, I guess these were too, but they're listing the various, differently shading the states of the USSR, which is good. Here we have Poland. Again, it's a bit sad to look at a map like this because within a few years, Poland would be essentially wiped off the map by combined invasions of Nazi Germany and the USSR. This is sort of a picture of Poland before the deluge. And the people of Poland, as much of Europe, suffered incredibly under that Nazi occupation, and then later, of course, from the Russians. Okay. Norway and Sweden, again showing the different regional names, which is nice. We have Switzerland here, showing the different cantons. Turkey and Syria, which is Lebanon is included on that map. Here we have Mesopotamia, modern Iraq, and then Armenia, Persia there, Iran. And then we have China and Japan. I see here that this area of the Shandong Peninsula is not shaded. Again, presumably that's because this map is not the updated map. Although again, and I'm going to have to not drone on about this, but in this particular map we see Manchukuo clearly spelled out, and then Shozan. But then this Shandong Peninsula doesn't say that it's controlled by anyone other than China, although I'm very positive that Japan was occupying that area at this time, hence the shading in the other map, but I don't know why it's not shaded in this map. The place names here, of course, are the old Wade-Giles system versus the modern pinyin for transliteration. So again, Xinjiang is now Xinjiang, or New Frontier. Tibet, of course, is essentially wiped off the map as far as the Chinese are concerned. But that's now Xinjiang, or Western Reserve. Taiping is here, which is Beijing, or Northern capital. And then Hong Kong, which is spelled as one word there. And there's Pennsylvania again, in case anyone needs to see how that fits in. But then this is, gang, this is where we get to the revelation of why this is a strange book, because the remainder of this book is all this census data, that is population figures. Oh, I'm sorry, well, I'll get to that in a minute. But this is all population figures from the 1930 US Census, which is fine. But here's a map of India, and that's good. But here's the deal. There are no detailed maps of Australia, of any of South America, of what's the other one? Oh, of the modern Middle East. To put it another way, this map showing Turkey is as close as we get to detailed maps of Saudi Arabia. Of course, Israel wasn't proclaimed. It did not exist at this time. But Jordan, which would be Transjordan at the time. But the point is that how do you look at that area in detail? Well, you don't. So this book weighs about, seriously, it weighs about 15 pounds. But in that 15 pounds of book, you have if you need to know that Albion, Rhode Island had a population of 305 people in it in the 1930 census, this book will tell you that. But if you want a detailed map of Argentina, you won't get it. Of course, they have the South American map, and they have the map of Mexico. And indeed, they have a precisely detailed rendered map of New Zealand, but not of Australia, not of, but you have one of Minnesota. So I don't know what to say about that. It's just the case that I've never honestly seen any large atlas purporting to be a comprehensive world atlas that does not have separate maps for all of the regions of the world, and certainly none that leave out an entire continent, namely South America. It's pretty weird, let alone the Middle East as well. So that's why I say it's an unusual atlas. That's why I say note Australia, because except for I mean, this is the only map of South Africa, and I grant you it's very detailed, but still, why wouldn't you have a separate map for Argentina or Brazil or any of these others? I don't know. Normally they do. They meaning atlases. But it is I like the book. It's certainly I don't want to say unique, but it's something that I haven't seen before. I'm just noticing that there's some pencil markings in here, so this was used. I'm going to guess that it was someone from Vermont because Vermont is circled here. It's a sloppy inference, I realize that, but I'm going with it. And so, everybody, this is it. This went about 150% longer than I expected, but there you go. That's I just can't shut up sometimes. So I'm going to practice saying the Ruhr Valley so that I know what I'm talking about. But I hope that you found this as interesting as I did. I appreciate you watching, and I will see you next time very soon. Thank you for watching. Bye.